The conference room fell silent as Emma Chen, CEO of Horizon Technologies, cornered Mark Winters by the water cooler. "Why are you avoiding me?" she asked, her voice carrying just enough authority to make everyone within earshot freeze. Mark's shoulders tensed as he clutched his coffee mug tighter, the dark circles under his eyes suddenly more pronounced under the harsh office lighting. What he said next would not only change the trajectory of his career but transform the entire company culture. If you've ever felt torn between work obligations and family responsibilities, this story might just break your heart, and then put it back together again. Like and subscribe if you've ever had to make impossible choices between your career and the people who matter most. Emma hadn't always been the intimidating figure she was now. 10 years ago, she was just another ambitious product manager with innovative ideas and relentless drive. Now, at 38, she commanded Horizon Technologies with the precision and vision that had landed the company on Fortune's Most Innovative list 3 years running. Her sleek black suits and perfectly styled bob had become her trademark, along with her reputation for expecting nothing less than excellence. "I'm not avoiding you," Mark replied, though they both knew it was a lie. He had been ducking out of meetings early, declining team lunches, and submitting reports via email rather than presenting them in person as was customary for senior project managers. Emma crossed her arms. "My office. 5 minutes." She turned on her heel, leaving Mark staring into his lukewarm coffee, aware of the sympathetic glances from colleagues who assumed he was about to face the legendary Chen interrogation that had sent more than one executive updating their resume. Mark Winters had joined Horizon 4 years ago, quickly establishing himself as one of their most reliable project managers. His team consistently delivered on time, his presentations were thorough, and clients specifically requested to work with him. But over the past 3 months, something had changed. Projects were still completed, but barely making deadlines. He looked perpetually exhausted, and the easy charm that had made him a favorite among clients had dimmed considerably. As Mark made his way to Emma's corner office, he passed the framed mission statement he'd once found so inspiring, innovating for tomorrow while valuing today. The words now felt like an accusation. Emma was reviewing quarterly projections when he knocked. "Come in," she called, not looking up immediately. When she did, she gestured to the chair across from her desk. "Sit." Mark sat, his posture rigid. The view of the city skyline through the floor-to-ceiling windows behind Emma would normally have been calming, but today it just reminded him how high the stakes were. His job at Horizon was the most prestigious position he'd ever held, and the highest paying, which mattered more now than ever before. "I've been patient, Mark," Emma began, closing her laptop to give him her full attention. "Your performance reviews have always been exemplary, which is why these past few months have been so concerning. You're distracted, unavailable, and frankly, not the team player you were hired to be." Mark nodded, accepting the criticism without defense. "I understand how it looks." "Then help me understand how it is," Emma countered. "Because right now, I'm questioning whether you still want to be here." The question hung in the air between them. Did he still want to be here? 6 months ago, the answer would have been an unequivocal yes. Now, everything was complicated. Mark took a deep breath. He'd rehearsed various explanations on his drive to work, but facing Emma's direct gaze, all his carefully prepared statements evaporated. "My wife died 3 months ago," he said simply. Emma's expression shifted instantly. "Mark, Cancer," he continued, his voice steady despite the pain behind the word. "It was quick. Too quick for any of us to really process it. Especially Lily, she's 7. The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken understanding. Emma's eyes softened as she leaned forward slightly. "I had no idea. We kept it private. Melissa didn't want to be defined by her illness." Mark's voice caught slightly on his late wife's name. "I thought I could handle everything, be the same employee, just with more on my plate at home. But I was wrong." Emma's gaze drifted to the single framed photo on her desk, then back to Mark. Why didn't you say anything? We have bereavement policies, family leave options. Mark's laugh was hollow. And then what? Come back to the same impossible situation? Lily needs me home by 5:30 for dinner. She has nightmares and crawls into my bed at 2 a.m. The babysitter can only stay until 6 p.m., and after-school programs end at 5. My mother-in-law helps when she can, but she's 73 with her own health issues. He ran a hand through his hair, which Emma now noticed needed a trim. I've been leaving early to pick up Lily, then logging back in after she's asleep to finish my work. I've been avoiding in-person meetings because they always run long, and I can't be late for pickup again. Lily had a complete meltdown last time, terrified I wasn't coming back either. Emma was silent for a long moment. Mark braced himself for the standard corporate response, sympathy followed by a gentle reminder about job responsibilities and company needs. Instead, Emma stood and walked to the window, her back to him. My father died when I was 9, she said quietly. My mother worked 2 jobs to keep us afloat. I was a latchkey kid before the term existed, making my own dinners and putting myself to bed. She turned to face him. I promised myself that when I had the power to change things, I would. And yet here I am, running a company where a grieving father feels he has to hide his struggles rather than ask for help. Mark hadn't expected this vulnerability from the notoriously private CEO. It's not your fault. It's just how corporate America works. It's exactly my fault, Emma countered, returning to her desk. I've been so focused on quarterly results and market expansion that I've forgotten what our mission statement actually means. Valuing today isn't just about current market opportunities, it's about valuing the people who make this company what it is. She opened her laptop again, typing quickly. I'm sending an email to HR and your department head. Effective immediately, you're on a modified schedule. Core hours in office from 9 to 3, with flexibility to work remotely for the remaining hours. We'll reassess in 3 months to see if it's working for everyone. Mark stared at her, stunned. Just like that? Just like that, Emma confirmed. And I want you to be honest with your team about why. Not because you owe them personal details, but because I suspect you're not the only one struggling to balance work and life. Your transparency might give others permission to ask for what they need. For the first time in months, Mark felt something loosen in his chest. Thank you. I don't know what to say. Say you'll stop avoiding me, Emma replied with the hint of a smile. And maybe bring Lily to the company picnic next month. I hear the face painting is excellent. As Mark left Emma's office, he felt lighter than he had since Melissa's diagnosis. The weight of grief was still there, it would be for a long time, but the additional burden of pretending he was fine had been lifted. What Mark didn't know was that his honest conversation with Emma would catalyze changes throughout Horizon Technologies. The following week, Emma called an all-hands meeting to announce a company-wide review of work-life balance policies. She shared, without naming Mark, that a recent conversation had made her realize they were failing to live up to their own values. We can't innovate for tomorrow if we're burning out today, she told the assembled employees. And we certainly can't claim to value today if we're forcing our team members to choose between their families and their careers. The initiative, which would later become known as the Horizon Balance Program, started with small changes. Flexible scheduling options. Remote work opportunities. A core hours policy that ensured meetings happened only between 10 a.m. and 3 p.m., allowing parents to handle school drop-offs and pickups. An emergency childcare service for when regular arrangements fell through. For Mark, these changes meant he could be present for Lily in the ways she needed most. He could attend her school plays without requesting time off weeks in advance. He could work from home when she was sick instead of scrambling for childcare. Most importantly, he could be there at bedtime every night, reading stories and reassuring her that he wasn't going anywhere. 3 months after their initial conversation, Mark found himself back in Emma's office for the promised reassessment. This time, he brought a small gift, a framed drawing Lily had made of what she thought her dad did at work, which apparently involved a lot of colorful computers and people with enormous smiles. "She's got talent," Emma remarked, examining the drawing with genuine interest. "Though I'm not sure about these purple computers." "That's her favorite color," Mark explained. "Everything in her world should be purple, according to Lily." Emma placed the drawing on her desk, next to her own photo. "How are things going with the new arrangement?" "Better than I could have imagined," Mark admitted. "My team has been incredibly supportive. And honestly, I think we're more productive now. There's less time wasted in unnecessary meetings, more focused work during core hours." Emma nodded. "The preliminary data supports that. Across departments that have implemented flexible scheduling, we're seeing increased productivity and decreased burnout indicators. Turns out, treating employees like responsible adults who have lives outside of work actually benefits everyone." "Revolutionary concept," Mark said with a smile that reached his eyes, something that had been rare in recent months. "How's Lily doing?" Emma asked, her tone softening. Mark's expression grew more serious. "She has good days and bad days. The school counselor says that's normal. She still has nightmares sometimes, but they're less frequent. And she started talking about Melissa more, sharing memories instead of just crying when her mom is mentioned. That feels like progress." "It is," Emma assured him. "And how are you doing?" The question caught Mark off guard. Most people asked about Lily, assuming his grief was somehow less significant or that as the adult, he should be handling it better. He started, then paused, considering his answer carefully. "I'm learning to navigate this new normal. Some days are harder than others. But having the flexibility to be there for Lily without constantly worrying about my job has made an enormous difference. I can actually focus on healing, both hers and mine." Emma nodded, understanding in her eyes. "The modified schedule is working well for the company. I see no reason not to make it permanent, if that works for you." "It does," Mark said, relief evident in his voice. "More than you know." What neither of them fully appreciated in that moment was how their conversation 3 months earlier had set in motion changes that would eventually make Horizon Technologies a case study in progressive workplace policies. Within a year, employee retention rates improved dramatically. Recruitment became easier as word spread about the company's genuine commitment to work-life balance. Productivity metrics showed consistent improvement across departments. 2 years after Mark's honest answer in Emma's office, Horizon Technologies was featured in a major business magazine's cover story, "The company that puts families first, and profits anyway." The article detailed how Emma Chen had transformed her company's culture after a conversation with a grieving employee made her reassess her priorities as a leader. The morning the magazine hit newsstands, Emma found a copy on her desk with a post-it note attached, "Thank you for listening that day. Mark," and Lily, who is now insisting on being called Lillian because it sounds more grown-up. Emma smiled, remembering the shy 7-year-old she'd met at the company picnic 2 years ago, who had hidden behind her father's legs and peeked out occasionally to observe the activities. At last year's picnic, that same girl had confidently approached Emma to show her the butterfly painted on her cheek and ask detailed questions about what a CEO actually does all day. Later that afternoon, Emma called an impromptu meeting with her executive team. As they filed into the conference room, several glanced curiously at the magazine she'd placed at the center of the table. "Nice press," commented the CFO, picking up the magazine to examine the cover more closely. "It is," Emma agreed. "But it's not enough." Her team exchanged glances, familiar with the tone that signaled Emma had a new vision brewing. "The Horizon Balance program has been successful beyond our projections," she continued. "But it's still just one company making changes in an industry, in a society, that remains fundamentally hostile to the realities of family life." She tapped the magazine cover. "This article will generate some positive PR, maybe inspire a few other companies to implement similar policies. But what about the millions of workers who don't have the leverage of specialized skills or advanced degrees? What about the single parents working retail or service jobs who can't simply log in remotely after their kids are asleep? The room was quiet as her words sank in. Emma rarely brought political or social issues into business discussions, preferring to focus on concrete metrics and actionable strategies. "I'm establishing the Horizon Foundation," she announced. Initial funding will be $5 million from company profits, with a commitment to ongoing support. The mission will be advocating for family-friendly workplace policies across all sectors, with particular focus on industries where flexibility is traditionally limited. Her executive team looked surprised but not resistant. Over the past 2 years, they'd all seen the benefits of the company's policy changes, not just in business terms, but in the quality of their own lives. "We'll need to be strategic," the marketing director said, already thinking ahead. "This kind of advocacy can be politically charged." "Which is why we'll focus on the business case," Emma replied. "Our own data proves that supporting employees' family responsibilities isn't just compassionate, it's profitable. We've reduced turnover costs by 34%. Decreased absenteeism by 27%. Increased productivity metrics across all departments." She looked around the table at her leadership team. "We changed our company because one employee was brave enough to tell me the truth about why he was avoiding me. Imagine what could happen if we could change the conversation nationally." The foundation became Emma's passion project, though she remained fully engaged as CEO of Horizon Technologies. Mark, who had been promoted to Director of Project Management, served on the foundation's advisory board, bringing his personal experience to the organization's advocacy work. 5 years after that initial conversation by the water cooler, Emma found herself testifying before a congressional committee on family leave policies. As she presented Horizon's data and shared anonymized stories from employees whose lives had been transformed by flexible work arrangements, she caught sight of Mark and Lily, now 12 and preferring her full name, Lillian, sitting in the gallery. Lillian had grown into a confident preteen with her mother's warm brown eyes and her father's analytical mind. She still preferred purple and still occasionally crawled into her dad's bed after a nightmare, but those nights were increasingly rare. She had recently started a business selling friendship bracelets to classmates, with a portion of proceeds going to cancer research in her mother's memory. After the hearing, as they walked through the Capitol building, Lillian asked Emma a question that stopped her in her tracks. "Did my dad really change everything just by telling you the truth?" Emma considered the question carefully. "Not exactly," she finally said. "The truth created an opportunity for change, but the change happened because people were willing to do things differently. Your dad was brave enough to be honest about what he needed. I was willing to question assumptions about how work has to be. And a lot of other people at Horizon were ready to experiment with new ways of working." Lillian nodded, processing this with the seriousness that often surprised adults who didn't know her well. "So it wasn't just one conversation?" "No," Emma agreed. "But that one conversation was the catalyst. Sometimes that's all it takes, one honest moment between two people who are both willing to listen." Mark, who had been walking slightly ahead giving them space to talk, turned back with a smile. "And sometimes it takes a stubborn CEO who refuses to accept that's just how things are, as an answer." Emma laughed. "I prefer determined to stubborn." "Semantics," Mark replied with the easy familiarity of longtime colleagues who had become friends. As they exited the building into the bright spring afternoon, Emma found herself reflecting on how differently things might have gone if Mark had given her a more palatable answer that day in her office, if he had claimed he was just tired or stressed about project deadlines. She might have offered standard management advice about prioritization and delegation, and they both would have continued struggling in their separate ways. Instead, his honesty had created a ripple effect that had transformed not just their lives, but the lives of hundreds of Horizon employees and potentially thousands more through the Foundation's work. All because he had answered a simple question: "Why are you avoiding me?" with painful, necessary truth. The congressional testimony that day wouldn't immediately change federal policy, but it added momentum to a growing movement. More companies were beginning to recognize that supporting employees' family responsibilities wasn't just compassionate, it was good business. More workers were finding the courage to ask for what they needed instead of silently struggling or simply quitting. And in one corner of the business world, a company called Horizon Technologies continued to thrive under the leadership of a CEO who had learned that sometimes the most important innovations aren't technological breakthroughs or market disruptions, but